And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Spartan Stadium, Michigan State. College football season about ready to start this Friday night. Chippewas will be down here. 7 o'clock kickoff, I think it is. Michigan State looking to go 1-0 against the visiting Chippewas. Today, Mel Tucker had his weekly press conference. No surprise, didn't give any indication on the quarterback battle. Out here, they're doing a little painting, Paul. Yeah. They're putting the Spartan Head logo. Midfield, you got the 100 logo for the 100th year of Spartan Stadium. Hey, before I forget, make sure you give this channel a subscription. Subscribe here. Give us a like. Go over to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. $1 for a month. Give us a test drive. You will like it. Also, a deal right now: 50% off for the year, 50% off for the year. SpartanMag.com. We'd love to have you a subscriber over there. SpartanMag.com. Great coverage by Paul Konyndyk, the entire staff. Preseason practice. It's no longer preseason practice, Paul. Now it's game week practice. Tucker came out today. Your thoughts, your takeaways. It's game week. You ready?
Well, I'm ready. I'm always ready. But Mel Tucker, obviously different vibe today. You know, like the I'm not saying short-tempered, but lack of tolerance for questions that are not germane to the football season. You know, people are asking about this or that, and he's like, he wants to talk about this game this week and you know, his team as it is right now, and not talk about issues that are not related to what Michigan State does on the field. So, you know, Tucker indicated that they've already practiced multiple times, started work, you know, on the Chippewas last week, which we kind of thought they were going to do midweek after that, coming off the second Jersey scrimmage. Get to set your practice squad, set your two deep, and then get to work. And we don't know who's in that two deep, but they're obviously getting to work and obviously very serious about what they've got going on. You know, if Tucker said everything he needed to say in terms of what you usually say when you're prepared to play a mid-major opponent or mid-MAC opponent. You know, these guys are going to give them best shot. You know, if they've got good players, it's an in-state rivalry for everybody. All that being said, you know, I think they do have to take these guys seriously. I think Jim McElwain has done a nice job up there. I know they went 4-8 last year, not a great season, but McElwain has done a nice job with a proud program. And they haven't had it easy up there with, like, you know, some of the issues as a university that they faced. But football program is respectable. They're going to play decent defense. And, you know, if this is a four-quarter game, to use Mel Tucker's terms, Michigan State fans aren't going to be happy with it. But I think when you look at Central Michigan, and I haven't looked too closely at them, but the strength of that team is their defense. They've got a lot of guys coming back on defense, and that'll be a good sparring partner for Michigan State in game one. You know, we talked all season, all preseason about the quarterback. Is the running game going to get better? And you're going to find out real quickly against a good sparring partner where Michigan State is at. I'm not sure what they're going to CMU is going to be able to do on offense, but I know that they're going to give it their best shot on defense, and it'll be a good test for Michigan State, I think.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear Tucker talk about some of the preparation, some of the psychological preparation for this game, motivational preparation. First game of the year, Michigan State's players are going to be fired up no matter who they play, but he wanted his players to understand what this game means to Central Michigan. Jason Novak, Michigan State's strength coach, used to be a strength coach at Central Michigan before he went to IMG, I think.
Yes.
Sounds like Novak spoke to the team a little bit because Tucker says Novak knows what this game means to Central Michigan, and they conveyed that to the Michigan State players. Tucker also said that they showed film of the last time Michigan State played Central Michigan. I think it was 2018, and that game was tough. It was a tight game for, I think, at least 3 quarters.
No, for 4 quarters. I mean,
was it 4 quarters?
Well, it was different because it was like Michigan State did not score in the first quarter. CMU went up 3-0. Michigan State scored 17 points or 21 points in the second quarter, scored 17 in the third quarter, and then didn't get anything in the fourth quarter. CMU made it an 11-point game. It was 31-20. Michigan State was held scoreless. Fans came out of the stadium pretty grumpy. Brian Lewerke, I think he threw for $185, 1 interception. He ran for 2 touchdowns in that. But you know, so you're jumping out to a big lead, and then all of a sudden, you know, it doesn't end very well. And one of the things that Mel Tucker was asked about is how many guys are you going to play in this game? And I think that's one of the toughest questions to answer. And I think that's one of the things that really messes up a team's mentality going into a first game like this. Everyone's talking about, hey, when am I going to get in there? You know, how many guys are going to play in this game? And I think when you start talking about that in terms of a non-conference opponent or a team that's not perceived to be as good, that really starts messing with the psyche of the team. And I think Mel Tucker gave a good answer to that. He's like, we're going to win the game first off. That's our goal. But you look at that Central Michigan team that ended up being 31-20. As I said, that team was 1-4 going into that game or whatever it was. That was not a good record-wise team, but they gave Michigan State everything they could handle. And so when you start talking about as a team or as players on the team, hey, I wonder if how many freshmen are going to play, who's going to make their Spartan debut. That's where things start getting sideways in games like this. And I think Michigan State's got a good demeanor going into this game because the focus isn't on getting X amount of reps for everybody. It's about winning the game.
And Tucker said that stemming from that game, he said he showed the team some of the commentary after that game. He showed them highlights of that game. And I don't know what the commentary was, but it's probably along the lines of Central Michigan really gave Michigan State fits. I'm guessing was the final analysis. So, and what that meant to Central Michigan. They're going to come out, they're going to play hard, they're going to hit. And McElwain has said that last year was was unacceptable. He said he wasn't any good, the team wasn't any good, and it can't be like that, it shouldn't be like that, and he's vowed to be a lot better this year. That was the year after they went 9-4. That was the year after they almost beat Missouri at Missouri. They almost beat Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State. They did beat Washington State in the Sun Bowl.
Right.
Okay, just 2 years ago.
In the midst of a coaching change.
Yeah, and they don't have a lot of those players coming back, but there are players at that mid-major level that can give you a problem. Now, you've got to be really good at quarterback, in my opinion, for a mid-major to spring one of those upsets. You might be able to hang in it for a while, but you got to be good there. And Michigan and Central's quarterbacks, they had a guy that was quarterback last year. I think his name was Daniel Richardson. He lost his job at the end of the year, entered the portal, ended up at Florida Atlantic. The two guys behind him have moved up. Burt Emanuel Jr., his dad was a wide receiver in the NFL. He only played 4 games last year, rushed for over 400 yards, 7.4 per carry. Rushed for like 275 against somebody. I don't know if it was against Washington or against Buffalo, but he's kind of, as an athlete, reminds me kind of, he has some thickness to him, wide receiver body, playing quarterback like a thick wide receiver. Remember A.J. Troop at Michigan State? Kind of that type of athlete. Just picture that guy tucking and running. So he's a runner. The other guy, Bauer, he's a runner. So Michigan State's going to face a running quarterback, an offense that hasn't shown maybe that they can throw it around a lot. Maybe they'll come out and prove me wrong on that, but the MO for those two guys, and they've been competing for the quarterback job also. Central has an ongoing quarterback competition as well. Depending on who plays, more of a running style quarterback, which I think should match up better for Michigan State. Match up well in terms of Michigan State's toughness in the front seven. They should be strong there. They should be able to defeat blocks there and help keep a running quarterback contained. That's step one, but Central's going to come in here with the mindset that they are a 9-4 program, not a 4-8 program.
Yeah, the 2 years ago when they were really good, they had a decent quarterback, but what they had is they had a really good run game. I mean, they had a good veteran offensive line, and
Lou Nichols
at tailback, and I don't think Lou Nichols has done much.
Last year he was a little bit, some injuries got to him a little bit. He ended up getting drafted, I think. If not, he was drafted
6th round or 7th round. But
he led the nation in rushing 2 years ago. Last year, not as much because of injuries.
But
got drafted.
All the hype on him was Lou Nichols. I think the underrated aspect of what was going on at Central Michigan was the offensive line. I think they were really, really good, and I think Lou Nichols was good as well. But it's interesting to me to see if Jim McElwain will try to run the ball like they have in the past. And I think for a team to have a good MAC team to sustain success, they've got to be able to run the ball and do it physically, and that shortens games. And that's why they've been when they've had a good running game. Why they've been in games with teams that had more resources, had more talent than them, because they can shorten games and they can play a physical style that way.
They've been a 2 tight end team that likes to run it. Again, that might match up well with what Michigan State wants to do. I think for Michigan State, to win a game, you'd rather play someone like that than a Western Kentucky who's going to come in here and go up tempo and throw it 55 times. That can get a little more saucy. Looks like I got a sound check going on. They're playing Commander Cody Hot Rod Lincoln, Paul.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so Tucker, to no surprise, did not mention who the quarterback is, but the players know at this point. They've been told they're repping a first string and a second string. Whether or not they can keep it quiet all week remains to be seen. Between Hauser and Kim, I don't have any further insight on that one. I heard it was 50-50, going into that last scrimmage, and a lot of other items will go into that. That's a tough decision for Tucker that they've already had to make, presumably. And I think we talked about it last week that some things will include, like, the leadership, the competitor. Tucker's talked about he always wants the quarterback to be your number one competitor. Personality-wise, is one guy more further along as a competitor than the other? Does one guy seem to flip up, get the teammates, jacked up a little bit more than the other one? Do they respond better to one than the other? Those are things that I don't know. And like we said last week, is one quarterback better than the other coming to the line of scrimmage and getting into the right play and out of a bad play? Those are things I don't know. The rest of it sounded like it was pretty even. It's an interesting decision to make, and the decision has repercussions based on wins and losses. And like I said last week, a couple of years ago when it was Russo against Thorne, they went with Thorne by a narrow margin. And it was a narrow margin, but Russo didn't play all year. So there's a chance the number 2 guy doesn't get on the field. Yeah, and just talking possibilities and theoreticals. Theoretically, if Hauser's number 2 and it becomes like Russo and he doesn't get on the field, how do you keep him out of the portal? These are things that have to go into the decision. If you choose Thorne, or if you choose Kim, are you going to lose one to the portal more so than the other? Those are things I've got to believe in the war room that get discussed. Would you agree?
Yeah, obviously that goes into it. But going back to what Tucker was saying, they're going to go with who they think gives them the best chance to win a game. I do think that part of it's a player respect deal, like teammate respect. If you make a decision to play a guy because you're afraid of him transferring, there's nothing that could be worse for chemistry on a team than doing that. If players feel like that's the reason why you made a decision.
I'm just talking theoreticals here. We've not heard anything.
I'm just saying that. If you're talking about like chemistry, keeping a team together, that's one of those things. Like, that's something we can talk about theoretically, but I don't think you could make that. I don't think you can make that decision. The other thing I would say, like what I said last week, and I think this is kind of germane to the Central Michigan opponent. You want to have a quarterback that has the ability to look and see what's out there and make changes at the line of scrimmage, especially if this is a team like Mel Tucker mentioned that they mix coverages. They change up defensive fronts. They do it, disguise it well, and. You want to. Everybody out there has got to be confident, but you got to have a quarterback that can see things and make, can see through the smoke and make the right reads. Otherwise, something like that could get sideways real fast. And so I think that's going to be a big part of it. I think it's something that we don't look at a lot, or people don't look at a lot. Even people that know what they're looking at, when they see scrimmages and stuff like that. It's like, those are one of those things, like, we've covered a lot of quarterback competitions over the years, and it seemed like a lot of guys were close, and there's some scrimmages where you feel like some guy looked better than the others, and then the next day or the next week you ask the quarterback coach about it, and he's like, no, this guy graded out better on film, even though you thought he didn't look as good, or I thought he didn't look as good as the other guy. It's part of that grading system is, what do you do to get your team into right place? And I think, I think that's going to be a big deal this week.
All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up. Now, there's been a lot of talk around, Michigan State fans about an article that was in the Lansing State Journal, some quotes that Mel Tucker had about difficulties Michigan State's facing in terms of name, image, and likeness and what they're up against. And then there was some reaction from my friend Mike Valeni in Detroit, and a lot of people have been talking about that. I'm still kind of formulating all that. NIL is something that's very important for every program, and there's just a lot of it's hard to know exactly what kind of money is being floated out there. I think Tucker did get the message out there that Michigan State is maybe not what other schools are in terms of NIL packaging for players, but when they've lost recruits in the past year or so, Tucker's been like, well, we'll see, whether or not those schools actually provide the money that they said they were going to, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. As far as recruiting goes, Tucker's trying to put together, he thought he could come in here and do top 10 classes based on things. Maybe NIL is making that more difficult. In terms of scholarship room, you can't have a top 10 class because Michigan State, they feel pretty good about their 85-man roster right now. And unless they start cutting players, which becomes an ethical question and a controversial thing, it's hard to have a highly ranked class if you don't have a lot of room.
All right.
They feel good about the roster, but all of it, you throw it all together, and we talked about this a moment ago. Michigan State's got 12 commitments right now. I feel real good about at least 11 of them, maybe all 12. They've recruited well in that regard. Are they upset maybe that they couldn't be as competitive with Oklahoma for a David Stone. I mean, Oklahoma's got a ton of money, oil money down there, and a lot of people that love football and really they pass the cowboy hat in a big way down there for that. So you lose guy. They got By Job last year. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. But Michigan State, in terms of any thoughts that they would go out and outspend people toward a top 10 class, I'm not sure that was ever going to be possible.
Yeah, and I think you talk about do you cut people? Well, that's been going on.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not pretend it hasn't.
Not so much recently. That I mean, they're
that's
full right now.
To me, that's a positive thing, because if these guys have shown the proclivity to cut guys or say, hey, listen, you're not our style, you're never going to play. Find your way to the portal and find a different program, and then all of a sudden you're saying that, well, these guys, you're keeping what you got, and you're saying the chemistry's great. You really like the team. That's a positive in my mind, because you don't. I think it's bad to have like a revolving door type of thing, and that creates a false sense of, oh, we're recruiting at a high level when you're bringing in a class, and some of those guys that you brought in make your class look really good. Not here for more than a year, and then they're gone. Mm-hmm. So you've got a top 25 class, but then you end up signing 26, but keeping 18. There's not much difference than what is going on right now. I do think the one area that they've really got to do a better job of, they've got to identify and develop interior defensive line talent, just like they've identified and developed offensive line. I think if Michigan State is able to compete at a high level this year, a lot of that's going to be player development on the O-line. You look at the one position in this program since Mel Tucker came in, offensive line, they have had very few guys transfer out. Mm-hmm. And you look at those third-year guys like Ethan Boyd. He was one of those tweeners. He was a guy that was just borderline even close to getting a scholarship at this level. They brought him in. Now he's knocking on the door. He's actually pushing for a starting job, and he's done a really nice job. But you look across that offensive line, Gino Vandermark, a guy that was highly recruited coming in, but he took a couple of years. It took him a little bit of time. And a lot of other guys like that. Those are developmental positions. And you can say, oh, we didn't get David Stone, but the guys that you need are guys like Harmon, guys like Jacob Slade last year, guys like Simeon Barrow. Those guys are guys that had a lot of talent. They've got NFL talent, but they were developed. And you might be able to bring in a guy like David Stone once in a while, but that is no guarantee that David Stone as a freshman is going to be better than Simeon Barrow as a senior or as a junior. So I think there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. There always has been, but I think you need a mixture. I'll go back to the Tom Izzo basketball model. You need a mixture of high-level NBA-type guys with a bunch of guys that are guys that maybe are knocking on the door to NBA, maybe not quite there, but it can't be all blue chippers. You got to have development as important as anything. You look at Iowa in the last draft. You look at some of the teams that Purdue have had in the last few guys that they've sent out in football. You look at Illinois this year. That's a player development draft, and you can tell me, hey, this guy's ranked top 50. That's great for headlines. 5 stars are awesome for headlines, and they do make a difference in your program, but you can't skip one area and prioritize the other area. I think you got to do it collectively. And, I think Mark D'Antonio had a pretty good model in terms of a lot of what he did. You can argue
it still applies, even though the landscape has changed in a lot of ways. Not every way, but in some ways.
The other thing I was telling you a little bit ago when we were talking about this off camera, I firmly believe that there's more available talent now because of the transfer portal. So there's more available high school talent. And if people put that, because
so many people are focusing on the portal,
right? So there's guys that Mark D'Antonio, like people are like, he wouldn't be able to coach in this climate. I'd say bull crap to that, because he'd have more available talent at the high school level, and develop. Now the key is, would those guys stay in the program? Would guys like Danico Salad, would guys like Darian Harris, guys that took some time to develop, would Tony Lippett, would they stay in the program and allow that process to take place? Now, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that the offensive linemen in this program, they've stayed, and they've done a nice job developing. Now,
they look like they're on the right track. We don't know for sure that they'll be there, but it looks that.
Well, even like Gino Vandermark last year, he started out getting a few reps early in the season. Then at the end of the year, he looked okay when being kind of put into a tough situation. He did a nice job at Penn State, and he's getting pushed, and you got guys pushing from behind. So the development model does work, and I'm all for going out and spending a crap ton of money on a guy like Bo Jackson, but that's not to say that if you're bringing in $1 million offensive linemen, that those guys are going to do anything. It's like an argument can be made that if you're bringing in like spend a lot of money in developmental players, the pressure for those guys to perform immediately is immense. They might not be allowed to develop, or they might not, because of their wealth, they might have their focus on something else, their brand, as opposed to developing. And there's an argument there. I think you need to be holistic. I think you need to do everything. You need to have a strong walk-on program. You need to have strong player development, which I think Michigan State offensive line, they've shown that's been a nice deal. I think you need to have strong transfers. I think also you need to have strong character transfers, and you do need to be on the same page with everyone in the university when it comes to NIL. But it's not one thing or the other. I do think in college football we have a tendency to covet our neighbor's wife, to use a biblical example. And I think everyone's always looking at shiny objects. Oh, look what they've got. That's better than what I've got. And sometimes it isn't always better, and I think also the thing about the timing of that article, I think from if Mel Tucker could do that over, sitting down and doing that article is fine. I have no issues with that whatsoever. Talking about NIL, talking about like real issues that you see, big picture for the future of the program, no problem at all. But when you do that so close to kickoff of game week, then it becomes a focus on what Michigan State lacks this season and not big picture down the road. And I think it's kind of disappointing that it's kind of blown up the way it has, but it's not a surprise to me because of where it was. If it was in the summer, it'd be a talking point and it would run its cycle really fast.
Like in June or something like
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. Like that's one of those midsummer things. Like if you sat down with Mel Tucker at Sound Mind, Sound Body Camp or something like that, and he said, you asked him, hey, long term, what do we need to do? What does the program need to do for NIL to be competitive for a guy like David Stone? Mm-hmm. or whatever. But the timing of it up so close to the kickoff of the football season, it's not a good look, in my opinion.
And in terms of the fairy tale thought for some fans out there, or I don't know if they ever thought this, but the idea that you could ever go out and pay top dollar for 80 players on a roster at one time, I mean, that's not going to happen. That's not conceivable. That's not practical. You're not going to pay that much money for 80 guys. Right. You're going to have those developmental guys, like you said. You got to block and tackle. Wait and see what Wisconsin does. Let's see how they get it going. They're not going to be out there buying a lot of players. They're going to be a developmental program. They'll have a few sprinkled in, and like you said, sprinkling a few in. That might be the happy median. That might need to be the secret sauce. Going out there and spending like Georgia and Alabama for those players down there. Not really available to you here. Now, that doesn't mean you could go out and compete with them every single year, but can you cycle up and be good, at a given time and make your hay at that point? Maybe so. And that's what Michigan State always has been since 1970, and they've failed at trying to do that. They've been up and down trying to get there. Now things have changed, portal, NIL, but it's getting back to that situation. And you can win, but you can't have much slippage at all, and that's kind of where Michigan State is. We have some other thoughts about big picture program and all those type of things. We'll get into that later as the season goes along. But we got to wrap this one up. But good thoughts, Paul. Anything else?
One last thing. Michigan State has historically had more resources available to it, like people resources, than a place like Iowa. It's easier to get a kid from Detroit or a kid from Chicago to go play football at Michigan State than it is to play at Iowa. So Iowa's done a really great job of developing guys. They've gotten guys that no one even thought about. Like, I think of a guy like Josie Jewell from in-state. They ended up he's still in the NFL, heck of a linebacker. But they've done a nice job developing their big guys, tight ends and whatnot. But they've lacked, at least in recent years, the last decade maybe, skill players, like really good skill players, like NFL skill players. Michigan State can do what Iowa has done, and they can pull from more places than Iowa can. They can do what they've done front seven-wise, offensive line, tight end, and then you add in better skill players than Iowa has, and then all of a sudden now you're cooking with gas. And that's how you got to look at it. And yeah, you are going to have to win some, pay some NIL stuff, but do it with in-state kids who really want to stay home anyways. I think that's the thing. You start throwing around money for a guy that's from Oklahoma or something like that. You might not be able to win a bidding war for some guys in-state, But some guys might want to stay home but want X amount of dollars so they can take care of their family. You know, you got to be smart about what you do with your money.
I do think that Michigan State's done a good job with some of their 3-stars that they ended the class with last year.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good sign. There'll be more of that. That's got to be part of the mixture. That's got to be one of the tent poles that makes the whole thing work.
Part of that is like just simply having a recruiting staff that's not looking at the number of stars they have on a name and looking at talent level. And one of the things that I didn't like about Saeed Khalif is the fact that he was upset when Michigan State didn't have a 4-star or they missed out on a 4-star. If I'm a recruiting evaluator and I'm a personnel guy, I'm looking for whoever can help my team win football games regardless of what the perception is of that player. I want guys that can be ranked a 3-star but end up being NFL players because they have the frame, the athleticism. It doesn't matter what they're ranked.
Evaluation and player development is still going to be key.
I want Tywan Jones, man.
Blocking and tackling, those things. Now, but doing it, now Tucker wants to do it with a certain size because he's got very high goals and ambitions about who he wants to compete with. So it's easy for us to talk about theoreticals but you got to believe that those players are still out there. And like you said, maybe more than used to be because more of those guys are getting left over because a lot of programs are looking in the portal, whereas there might be a little bit better 3-star talent available to programs than it used to be. There's different ways to do it. And if Michigan State does start winning on a regular basis, then you can go and pick and choose with some of those NIL deals here and there and be more competitive, and the snowball can get rolling that way. Not an exact science. There's a lot of big money programs out there trying to get it done, and no matter who you play, once you get in the conference season, there's a staff over there of $1 million coaches that are getting paid $1 million to beat you. Right. So it's competitive. It's always entertaining, college football. We love the college football. It's almost college football season, and we'll be kicking it off Friday here at Spartan Stadium. We'll be there watching it and covering it at SpartanMag.com. Anything else, Paul?
Yeah, my 8th grade gym teacher must have snuck in and got on the PA, man, with this music out here.
Boston rock and roll band they just played.
Yeah, and the other thing is
I didn't need to hear this.
Turn it up.
No.
Here's the other thing. My last thing is the Tampa Bay Rays are one of the best teams in baseball year in and year out. They do it with evaluation, player development, and they beat the Yankees a lot. And there's different ways to skin a cat. That's all I'm going to say.
I never understood why cooking with gas has recently become like a good thing. Because everything I hear about from barbecue experts is you don't want to cook with gas.
Well, here's the thing. We just lost power in my generator. The battery crapped out, so I couldn't use the generator. We had a gas oven, dude. Cooking with gas works. Oven still works because we're still hooked up to propane.
In a pinch, I can get that. I understand that. But I always thought like cooking with hickory and charcoal and big green egg and all that stuff is the way to go.
No. You don't strike as a big green egg. You're not injecting your meat?
No.
Okay.
So, but the cooking with gas thing, I'm not sure why that's become an analogy for like optimal.
I don't think it means
performance.
I don't think it means cooking. To me, I'm not thinking about cooking. I'm like, I can burn a lot of crap up with gas. So.
All right. So there's that. All right, for Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. You've been watching the VCast from Spartan Stadium with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.